Alrighty, for the most part, this was another very solid, very high quality episode of Star Wars Rebels. Probably not quite as good as the last one, but still, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, the plot of this one is it picks up basically right after the last one, which basically leaves Kanan in Imperial custody. He's a prisoner. He's being interrogated by Tarkin and the Inquisitor, and basically our remaining four heroes have to figure out whether or not to actually go and rescue him. And Hera even contacts her secret associate Fulcrum, who you actually see a hologram of Fulcrum this time around, although Fulcrum is hooded. But I'll get to that in a second, because that I actually have a pretty strong inclination of, or a pretty strong idea of who it is. But again, I'll get to that in a second. What did I like about this episode? Well, there were some interesting questions raised about what the rebels should do. If this particular episode was put in lesser hands, then you could have easily just had the rebels quickly discover where Kanan is, and the whole episode just be kind of a rescue operation. But the thing is, they maintain that tension. They maintain the uncertainty that surrounds the fact that we don't have a leader anymore. I mean, there's Hera, but basically one of the big rallying points, and one of the guys who inspires us to go on, is not with us anymore. And one thing I really liked was the extreme contrast between Ezra's objectives and Hera's objectives. And what I mean by that is Kanan was basically, or not Kanan, Ezra was basically all gung-ho about going to rescue Kanan, whereas Hera, she was a little bit more hesitant. In fact, she was outright against it at one point. And because Fulcrum basically said to her, if you guys get caught, you guys can't keep taking these risks. If you guys get caught, then the hope dies. I mean, you have a primary objective here. You have to see the bigger picture. And Kanan, as much as he meant to you individually, you guys have to keep the hope alive, because you actually have to kind of see him as just a soldier. So taking that stance on the whole scenario, I thought was actually pretty impressive and pretty mature for something that's airing on Disney XD. Granted, Disney XD has had some good shows in the past, especially recently with shows like Tron Uprising, which actually dealt with sort of similar subject matter, with Clue and all of his cronies, all the orange guys, all the red guys, basically representing the Empire. But I digress. I'll get to Tron Uprising another day. And at the same time, Ezra was also raising some good points about we should go after him. He's our friend. He's not just some soldier. If we lose, the episode didn't outright come out and say this, but I think a recurring theme of this episode is, where do you draw the line between friend and soldier when it comes to something like this? And in addition, some interesting setup for potential future episodes. First of all, Ezra basically promising a favor to this gang lord, or this black market dealer. I forget what profession he's in, but basically him promising this guy a favor in the future if he tells them, how do we find Kanan. So that provides some interesting setup for future episodes. And in addition, the whole identity of Fulcrum, in my opinion, it's Ahsoka Tano. It's Ahsoka Tano, and I'm not just saying that because her fate was left ambiguous at the end of the Clone Wars, because we really just know that she walked off into the sunset and her fate is basically uncertain after that. But considering it's a large part of the same creative team behind the Clone Wars, and also considering we never saw Ahsoka die, and also given the fact that this would actually fit her character, what this Fulcrum individual is doing, even taking all of that out of it, when we actually hear Fulcrum speak, they do kind of distort the voice. They make it sort of like they make it sort of this like machine type voice. It's basically the same thing that they do to Leia's voice when she's wearing the bounty hunter helmet briefly in Return of the Jedi. So it's basically sort of like that, and that had to be an homage considering this particular creative team and how they love to call back to the movies. But in addition, just the speech pattern or not really the speech pattern, but just the voice. Even taking the distortion out of it, just the voice and how this character pronounced certain words and how this character talked, and just the overall manner of speech and the overall dialect. I was thinking, oh my God, this is Ahsoka Tano. Now, I very well could be wrong, but it is. I have a very strong feeling that I guess you could say the Force is talking to me, but I don't mean to crush anyone's dreams by saying the Force is not real, but there you go. Yeah, all inclinations point to it being Ahsoka Tano at this point. Although, if it does turn out to be someone else, then bravo on misleading me. But where does this episode go wrong? Well, I don't really want to say it goes wrong, because this was a pretty solid episode. But where I think it could have actually been improved is take out the scenes where Kanan is being interrogated, because it doesn't really add much to the story. We still would have known what was happening to him and what is going to happen to him at the end of this episode. So these scenes don't really contribute a whole lot to the story or the self-contained story of this episode. Not that they're not good scenes. I enjoyed seeing Tarkin and the Inquisitor continuing to work together and interacting with Kanan, and how he was having these one-liners or these retorts to the very, very painful looking interrogation that they were subjecting him to. Granted, this is not exactly Ramsay Snow torturing Theon Greyjoy from Game of Thrones, since it is on Disney, but still, it looked. I still liked these scenes, but in the context of this episode, I don't really see how they were entirely necessary, especially since I think it would have been more effective if we had gone the entire episode not really knowing if Kanan was alive. If they had actually maintained some sort of ambiguity as to, is he alive, is he not? How much do we risk without actually knowing if he is alive? So I think it would have made the episode that much more interesting. But again, as it stands, I still really enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed the issues that it raised. I enjoyed the very visible conflict with mainly Ezra and Hera. Sabine and Zeb occasionally got some good lines, but they were just kind of sidelined. They were just around to pick a side as to what to do. But some of the character stuff, and I know the indecision involving said characters, and what that says about them, and what that says about the bigger picture, was really where the strongest stuff in this episode lied. So again, very good episode. Look forward to the next one. I don't know if the season finale is next week. It might be. I originally thought that this season was supposed to have 16 episodes, but it may be less. So again, I guess we won't know until next week. So until then,